Welcome into episode 20 of the State Line Fast Break podcast. I'm your host, Kasey Boone. Alongside me, as always, is the great Josh Miller.
Here we go. Finals are wrapping up. Trades are already in full effect, and we're here to break it down right before the draft. Let's get into it.
We've got huge breaking news in the National Basketball Association today as the trade that we have all been waiting for has taken place. Kevin Durant has been... Oh, wait. It wasn't Kevin Durant, but we do have another big trade. Desmond Bane is on his way to the Orlando Magic. 4 unprotected first-round picks plus a first-round pick swap alongside Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Cole Anthony are headed to the Memphis Grizzlies, your Memphis Grizzlies, in this deal. 4 first-round picks. One of them is this year, number 16 overall in the draft. They get a pick that is a swap rights that they will have Phoenix's pick more than likely next year. They get an unprotected pick in 2028, a pick swap in 2029, and an unprotected pick in 2030 for Desmond Bane, who they had just recently signed to an extension, now makes his way, and it will be a seamless fit for the Orlando Magic sliding in at that 2-guard spot. They're going to have a foursome of Suggs, Bane, Paolo Banchero, and Franz Wagner. It's a very exciting team if you're the Orlando Magic. I would just have one big question around the value that they gave up here. Obviously, Bane was probably not somebody Memphis wanted to lose, and so the value had to be exponential. It's a heavy price tag for somebody that is not widely regarded to be a top 25, 30 player in the league. But Orlando goes out and gets their guy. Memphis capitalizes on a team that's desperate in a wide-open Eastern Conference, and I got a big question mark about if there are other teams in the East that are going to join the arms race and try to pull off a deal like this. But I want to get your thoughts from a Memphis Grizzlies fan. How do you feel about this deal for your Grizzlies? What do you think Desmond Bane can bring to the Orlando Magic?
I'm thrilled about this trade, and I'm not for the fact we're losing Desmond Bane, but just the sheer value of what we got back is really going to help us out, as we weren't sitting just great on draft picks, and now I have a great reason to stay up and watch the draft here soon, as we now are moved into pick 16. And we grab Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who I've always liked, and Cole Anthony, who I think is actually not too bad of a basketball player. I mean, neither one of those guys are as good as Desmond Bane. So, whoever wins the trade gets, or the best player in the trade is who wins the trade. I don't think we were going to win a championship either way. So I'm actually pretty happy about this, and I think a lot of people, including you, even give us credit for the haul we were getting to get back. It was not something that I think we were jumping to do in losing Desmond Bane, as he's really been arguably our most consistent player over the past 2 seasons as far as health and just play on the court. He's actually gotten a lot better. He's a guy who can go out and drop 30 almost any given night. Can actually underrated passer of the basketball, has really improved his 3-point shot. I mean, he's a very good basketball player. Don't get me wrong. I hate to lose him. But to go out and grab 4 first-round picks, including one that could be held by Phoenix next year, I mean, now I'm going to be rooting for Phoenix to be terrible next year, because that has a very good chance to be a decent pick next year. Who knows? And to move up to 16 this year, we could get a decent player there. Obviously, it's going to bring some question marks to our roster as a whole, as far as maybe are we guard heavy at this point, even though we lost Bane. But I don't think we're done making moves. I hope we're not done making moves. In fact, I'm a little concerned on if we're even going to keep either one of these guys that we traded for. I hope we do. I think they're both pretty good players. And but even like a guy like KCP, maybe that's somebody who we could move at the deadline to a team that's really, thinks they're close. Maybe Denver wants to grab him back or something at the deadline, and we can get some good value for him. I don't know. But overall, I'm happy as a Grizzlies fan. Not that we lose Desmond Bane, but just for what we get back. And then for him to go to Orlando, I actually think that's pretty good for him. He's getting to move to the easier conference. He's going to be with a proven guy who's on his way to superstardom in Paulo Banchero, and another guy who's got all-star capability in Franz Wagner. And then you mentioned Jalen Suggs, who was hurt towards the end of last year. But if you're a Magic fan, you're thinking, man, the East is wide open, and we're starting to see or at least this is a start to seeing the Eastern Conference kind of balance its way back out. I mean, it's just the law of averages here, as the West has so many good players, and the East is, it's nowhere near as good. So we're starting to see a little bit of balance shift back. But overall, I was pretty shocked seeing this news. I'm not shocked that we're making moves, but I figured it would be one of the two, Ja or Jaren Jackson Jr., which hopefully we get to see in the next couple weeks. But overall, I think this was a great job done by the Grizzlies front office, and we'll see how Orlando is next year. But if you're a Magic fan, you got to feel good about where you're sitting next year, but not feeling great on the package you necessarily gave up. So I don't know.
It's interesting to see Memphis make a move like this. Does this signal something more potentially happening in the future if it's a Jaren Jackson Jr. trade or a John Morant trade?
Please.
Are they going towards a rebuild, or are they just trying to reshuffle this roster because they think the Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., John Morant trio had run its course, and maybe if they reshuffle the roster a little bit and put a little different quality of pieces around him, that John Morant can have a successful run there. But I mean, Desmond Bane was a perfect fit next to John Morant. He's a 3-and-D guy. He's one of the higher caliber shooting guards in the league, especially when you come to shot making and defense. In terms of Orlando, it's a fascinating fit. I think it's a seamless fit there. It's exactly what they have been looking for. It's exactly what they were looking for in terms of the KCP addition in the first place. And, of course, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope did not have the quality of year that many had expected him to have when he went to Orlando. And so I think that signals the move to kind of shed that off. And it's been reported that part of this trade and part of the reason that Memphis was to get this quality of assets was they had to surrender a little bit extra to get rid of that contract, because KCP has 3 more years of $20+ million still locked in, which is not viewed as a great contract anymore. And so it's interesting to see that we're starting, like you said, the pendulum swing. Will we start to see some of these Western Conference teams that realizes how deep this conference is and how competitive it's going to be, and realizing their roster is not going to be able to live up to those expectations? And we're going to see some of these Eastern Conference teams realize, hey, we got a window here. I would like to see a team like the Detroit Pistons pull something like this off. I think they've got a very strong window with Cade Cunningham to say, hey, we can go out and acquire a guy like Desmond Bane and push our chips in and see where that leads us.
They should go after Jaren Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a fantastic addition to their team. A front court of him and Jalen Duren, I think, would be really fun to see. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects how teams operate moving forward. And we'll get into it after we talk about the finals here in a little bit, but there's going to be a lot of people questioning how this affects other superstar trades like Durant. I'm not sure it's going to have a direct impact because that's a completely different situation, but this is the first trade of the offseason, and we're not even through the finals yet, and it sets a clear market if you want one of these fringe star-level players. This is what the going rate is. Obviously saw what Mikal Bridges went for last summer. That was, again, a different situation than this one because it was the Brooklyn Nets trading with the Knicks, and so there's just a bump up in value there to begin with. But this sets the market for what the summer is going to be like for these type of players. And if you've got somebody you're not sure if you can win with, I think now would be a great time to go ahead and capitalize on those type of said players. Utah should go ahead and try to get rid of Lauri Markkanen. If the Lakers could get something out of Austin Reeves, try to maximize these type of players if this is the going rate, and you can disperse assets from there. And, I mean, Memphis is going to have plenty of assets now. They can pick a path. I mean, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, if you can bring some of that magic back, he can be a really productive player with you, so you don't have to completely head into a rebuild. You can just kind of reshuffle your assets and retool the roster in maybe a little bit different form than what it was in the past. So I think Memphis got the better end of the deal just because the asset quality that they're getting back. I think that Phoenix pick has a chance to be really nice next year. You get into this draft with the number 16 pick, and so I'm a big fan of how Memphis went through their process here and decided to make this move happen. And in terms of Orlando, I think this puts them in a top 2, 3, 4 team in the East next year with Boston likely dropping down a bit with the Tatum injury.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So if I was a Magic fan, like I said, I'd feel good about the now. And, they're going with the perspective that their own picks aren't going to be as good or, valued as high later on as, Paulo and some of their core is pretty young. And Desmond Bane isn't very old either. So, they're set up, especially in that Eastern Conference, and they needed offense. And he can come in. And like I said, he can go get you 30. He can go. I've seen him drop 40. He's really a flamethrower from 3 at times. Really has improved around the basket as well. Just a productive scorer in this league. And, he has at times had some turnover issues, but he's not a bad defender. Obviously, KCP wasn't very productive for him, but he's still a fairly good defensive player. Like I said, I'm curious to see what direction we sort of go in. But, I mean, if you're going to get offered some sort of package like this, and even if you get offered something like this again for a Jaren Jackson or a John Moran, I think you just got to take it and move on. Because, like I said, I don't see a championship, especially in that Western Conference right now. But I hope that this is just the start to the drama to the offseason, and this happens, like I said, before the finals even take place. But if this does get to a Game 7 that you've pointed out, the draft is only a few days later after that. So, and we are sitting at pick 16. We're going to have to go through a whole nother level of scouting and all those kind of things to see who we're going to select or if we're going to trade again. But I'm real curious to see who we can grab at 16. I mean, can we go get a Liam McNeely? Do we go get a big, knowing Edie's going to be out a little bit? Do we trade the pick? I really don't know, but it just brings a little more excitement to the NBA draft night for me, just because we didn't own a draft selection, and now we do.
Yeah, fascinating trade all the way around. I think it's only the beginning for the offseason. I was expecting a notification for a Durant trade today, and boom, early in the morning, Shams drops this with Desmond Bane. So I think there's only going to be fireworks from here because this wasn't even a guy that many had even talked about as a trade guy up until this point. And, I mean, like you said, where the finals isn't even over yet, and we're already getting a pretty blockbuster trade. And just for those that might be confused about how is this happening, how are we getting trades in the middle of finals, the NBA has in their rule book, once you are officially eliminated, your season is over, you are allowed to then begin negotiating terms on trades with other teams that are also eliminated. Teams that are currently playing will not be allowed and afforded that same opportunity, which, I mean, let's be real, they'll probably be negotiating as it is, and that stuff is going to work out after they get eliminated, but that's not something that the league really hampers down on. But in terms of this trade, the reason why you're seeing it happen so early is because with the new apron rules, these exact terms that have been agreed to would not be legal when it flips over to the new league year, because Orlando would be up against the apron parameters, and so this allows them to get it done before the new league year when both teams would be legal under the new apron rules. And so that's why you're seeing this happen now versus later, plus with the 16th pick being included, they want to get this done before the draft. But we will jump back into some more off-season conversations in just a minute, but we need to talk about the fact that the finals are 2-2 heading back to Oklahoma City. The Indiana Pacers really dominated majority of both of these two games at home. They ran away with it in Game 3, got a big-time win, which set off a lot of red alerts to a lot of people because that officially ended yours and many people's OKC in 5 picks. They were up 2-1. It just they ran them to death. It didn't feel like Oklahoma City was really in this game at any point. Halliburton had a near triple-double. Ben Mathurin was the story of this game as he had 27 points in 22 minutes, was just a flamethrower throughout the course of this game. It just was a complete performance. I thought Obi Toppin had several big-time minutes towards the end of that game. McConnell had 3 inbound steals alone in Game 3. One of them a steal and putback late in the fourth quarter that just you could tell from there that the Pacers were going to just coast to the end, get a big win. And then Game 4 started out. The Pacers just ran them up and down the court. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander looked exhausted. He wasn't even playing point guard most of the game until the fourth quarter. It was Jalen Williams bringing the ball up, controlling the offense. They looked just completely out of sorts, but the Indiana Pacers really didn't shoot the ball particularly well. I mean, neither team did. I think Oklahoma City made three-pointers the entire game, but Pacers shot like 42% from the field. And then it was a NBA referee show as there were 71 free throws attempted in this Game 4. A lot of people are going to point towards Scott Foster, but there's several other officials that made many questionable calls. The game felt like it dragged out with reviews. It just was a classic NBA officiating performance in this one that really I don't know that we had seen up until this point in the finals. Most people are trying to hate on Scott Foster now, calling him the extender as he's able to push another series deep in the finals, which they're saying, and you got Tim Donaghy, who was involved in that gambling scandal, come out and say that the league told him multiple times to prioritize extending series for revenue purposes. But anyways, Pacers looked like dominant through the first 3 quarters. They were up 7 going into the fourth, and then that was when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander took over. Just a signature performance. If we look back on his career and we look back on the series and they win the series, that fourth quarter is going to be a signature moment, defining moment in the series in his career. They were able to take a 2-2 lead in this series going back to Oklahoma City, getting back that home court advantage. Just a tale of just 2 different games. Oklahoma City felt like they were more resilient in that fourth game in the series. It didn't seem like they had a ton of fight in Game 3. Pacers really, to me, have been incredibly impressive, and even with them losing home court, I wouldn't count them out in this series.
Yeah, a lot to unpack here, as I believe Game 3 and Game 4 were very similar games, although just different, the exact different or opposite roles for the teams, as the Thunder seeming to control a good portion of the first 3 quarters of Game 3 and then seemingly wore down in that third and fourth quarter against the Indiana Pacers in Game 3. As you mentioned, Mathurin had his best game of his career in this kind of finals. As he's had a couple games in this playoffs where we questioned, was he even going to be able to play in the next game because of his shot selection, some other things. But he came out and really showed up with 27 points on 9 of 12 from the field. T.J. McConnell becomes the first player in the NBA Finals history to come off the bench and give him 5 assists and 5 steals in a game. But I really point, and yeah, you're right. I was way wrong. Didn't think this thing would go as far as it is, but here we are. We are tied 2-2, or 2-1 at this point, and then we move to Game 4. And the Pacers are either tied or leading most of this game, and that is when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander hasn't played a great game up to the fourth quarter. And back against the wall, it seems like this series was really about to take a turn for the Pacers, as if they could have taken a 3-1 lead, I just don't know how the Oklahoma City Thunder would have made their way back. But he shows up, and he was the aggressor in the fourth quarter. There was a lot of videos going around about how wore out he was in Game 3. Well, he was wore out in Game 4 as well, but he put that past him, and you already mentioned it, but really this is a historic fourth quarter for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander given the circumstances. I'm going to be honest with you. The Indiana Pacers defense this year has been, in the regular season, was pretty below average, in my opinion, but they have improved like in a crazy amount in this playoff run to the point where the Thunder at times just look pretty bad on offense, especially when they're not getting these points off turnovers. And it's just a lot of ISO ball. It's a lot of Shea ISO. It's a lot of Jalen Williams ISO. A lot of contested threes from, Dort and some other guys. But also, I know he hasn't necessarily had a great series, but I thought Chet Holmgren was very big in this game. Keeping them afloat, had multiple putbacks off Shai Gilgeous-Alexander misses in this game. Ends up with 14 points and 15 rebounds. Was a plus 14 in this game, in Game 4. But we cannot go without mentioning Scott Foster. And I know you're probably not as against him as I am, but I just think it's obvious. I mean, if you check him on Twitter, everyone calls him the extender, but I'm not blaming just him, but man, the free throws in this Game 4, it was just hard to watch at times. I mean, it was just non-stop. This game took forever. It was on, it was a Friday night, so if y'all were watching it, I'm sure y'all were up fairly late having to watch this game. But, I mean, the three big guns, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, end up with 27 free throw attempts and made every single one of them. So, you can get fouled, you still got to go hit the line and hit them. And Shai really wasn't getting the whistle at all in this game until the fourth quarter, and that's what really makes fans start to question, including myself. But yeah, the extender extends it again, but I still got to give credit to Shai Gilgeous for putting his, him being tired past him and being the aggressor, because I think in each game in this series it goes quarter by quarter, but it's about who's being the aggressor, who's pushing it more. Because both defenses have actually been, we expected the Thunder's defense to be very good, and it has. But really the Pacers' defense has been very good in forcing a lot of ISO situations for the Oklahoma City Thunder. But the Oklahoma City Thunder hit 3 3-pointers and only shoots 16 threes for the game. And they win on the road by 7 points. I mean, in the finals, that's just pretty remarkable to me that this was something capable while looking at the stat line. But really, the Oklahoma City Thunder got wore down in Game 3, but the Indiana Pacers seemingly got wore down in Game 4. And, that's just kind of how these things go. That's why you can't put too much stock into each game, but each game feels like it's the end of the season for a team, and whoever wins feels like they're going to win the next 3 to 4 championships. But this has been an extraordinary series, and I picked Thunder in 5, but in a way I'm glad I was wrong, because I wanted an entertaining series, and we have got one.
Yeah, if you don't like this, you're not really a basketball fan, because this is just incredible hoops every single time these two step on the court. They're very, very similar basketball teams in terms of the way that they want to play. They want to play up and down the court. They want to get after you on the defensive end. Both teams have numerous guys that aren't afraid to pick up 90 feet from the basket and just be aggressive the entire 4 quarters. These games are marathons. They're not sprints. They're marathons. 3 of these games have been teams that had massive fourth quarters that pushed them to the win. And so I think that's what you have to take away from this series is you can't count either one of these two teams out. They've been resilient all year. Oklahoma City was in the exact same situation, down 2-1 to start the series. Got that big Game 4 win on the road in Denver. eventually go on to win that series in 7. And so people are drawing comparisons to that series in terms of how the Oklahoma City Thunder have battled back in these series and the adversity that they've gone through and how that has prepared them for this moment. They didn't blink one time in Game 4. It did not look pretty for them for a majority of the game. Free throws kept them in it, really. They made 34 free throws throughout this game. Like we said, 3 out of 16 from the three-point line. They didn't shoot it very well. They made more field goals on the night as the Pacers shot 5% less from the field, and so that really killed them. You can't really put a finger on how the rest of the series is going to go just because it's been so up and down. These two teams never quit. You can't count any of them out. So to say that, and a lot of people are going to point it out, and I even have questioned, did the Indiana Pacers lose the NBA championship when they lost Game 4, when they gave up in this series? They had them down 10 at one point with like 10 minutes to go in the game. Did they lose the NBA championship in that moment when the Oklahoma City Thunder stormed back and stole back home court advantage? Because if the Pacers were going to get up 3-1, they haven't lost back-to-back games since March 1st, I believe. And you're expecting the Thunder to win 3 in a row on this team. I don't think that's super practical, and I think the Pacers probably win this series if they had won this game. And now it looks incredibly murky for them moving forward. I think the player I was most impressed with, obviously, the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander fourth quarter was incredible, but I mean, Jalen Williams has really risen to be a star player throughout this series. A lot of people are starting to put thought into where he ranks league-wide. I even heard Bill Simmons say he's as high as top 15 potentially in the entire league. So it's very interesting to see the discourse on him throughout this series and throughout this playoff run as he's kind of risen up. Alex Caruso was huge. I mean, he has legit conversation to win Finals MVP here. He won't do it, but just because they're going to go with one of these big names and they're going to give it to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander probably on the back of this fourth quarter. But Caruso was massive for them. I thought he kept them afloat.
7 of 9.
Multiple times throughout the first 3 quarters. He was all over the court defensively. After what I thought was a very bad Caruso game in Game 3, he comes and responds like the NBA champion that he is. It just, at this point, I think it's hard to say anything other than this series goes 7 games. That would be my prediction right now. I still think the Thunder are probably the more talented overall team, but to me the Pacers have been significantly more impressive throughout this playoff run, and so I'm not going to count them out. But I will say the series goes 7. I'm just still not sure about a winner. I will lean with the home court team just because we've already seen it once before from them, but that's kind of where I would be right now. But I would be incredibly nervous if I was the Thunder, and I would be feeling very lucky that we were able to escape out of there with a win in Game 4.
Yeah, I'm the number one thing I'm concerned about if I'm a Thunder fan is just the consistency of the half-court offense. It just seems so dry at times, and that's really kind of how they've been all year. But because they force so many turnovers, they get so many points off turnovers. But when if you're not getting those 20 to 30 points off of turnovers, and you have a couple guys not necessarily show up, then you're not going to be putting up a crazy amount of points, and it's just going to cost you to exert even more energy on the defensive end, which they're perfectly fine to do. But I think we got to give credit to Lou Dort as well on the defensive end, as Tyrese Halliburton has just having to work so hard for anything he's getting as far as scoring the ball or passing the ball, and he hasn't had like that. He's played well in this series. Obviously, he's had a huge moment in Game 1 and had some pretty big moments in Game 3, but hasn't had just a signature game to remember. He's had moments to remember, but not necessarily a full-out game to remember, and that's a lot to do with this Thunder defense and Lou Dort and his efforts. Also, he only took 2 shots in Game 4, but actually in Game 3 was a guy who hit a number of 3-point shots which, he can go hot or cold from three. But I do want to give a shout out to his defense. And, I mean, I know you are a big fan of Miles Turner, and I'm not going to just, crap on him because he really played bad in this game 4. But I think they're just going to need if they want to get this series win, they're going to get 2 more wins. They're going to need Miles Turner to be at his best, and he did not show up in game 4 on the offensive end. He was 0 of 6 from 3. Really just didn't. I just didn't like his 3-point shot selection. But I mean, he can be deadly with that 3-point shot. I just think he relied on it a lot in that game 4. But game 3 really had some signature defensive plays on Chet Holmgren, especially down the stretch in that 4th quarter. But I think I mentioned whoever, the aggressor here, but also who's going to wear down first, because as I mentioned earlier, the last 2 games, the losing team has simply just wore down in the 4th quarter, and a lot of that has to do with what the other team is doing to them to make that happen. So it's going to be really loud in Oklahoma City on Monday night. But I mean, we're not there, obviously, but it seems to me that Gainbridge Fieldhouse seems even louder, even more into the game than Oklahoma City fans are, which, both of these 2 fan bases are very good and small. Even though they're small market teams, you can tell their cities back around their basketball team, and both of these teams sort of exemplify what their cities represent. So the home court advantage hasn't disappointed one bit. And I mean, like I said, it's just been a much better series than I should have, that I did expect. But once again, I keep doubting the Pacers, and they just continue to prove me wrong again and again and again. I'm still gonna choose the Thunder, but I'm trying to tell myself that it will go 7, just because the Pacers continue to prove me wrong over and over. But I'll stick with I was already wrong, so I will go to your pick of Thunder in 6. But I would not be shocked if it was Thunder in 7. I still would be very shocked on Pacers to win this series. It's just hard for me to wrap my mind around it. But once again, credit to Rick Carlisle and this Indiana Pacers ball club to even be sitting at this position that they are at right now.
Yeah, and as somebody who's been to Gainbridge Fieldhouse a couple times, I can attest that is a very raucous building. It's one of the nicer NBA arenas by all accounts. They have put in a lot of thought on the way they want to build that arena and where it's placed in downtown. And Indiana is a basketball state. They are passionate about their hoops. Obviously, that's where Hoosier was filmed. So there's just a lot of passion from that fan base. They haven't had a ton of success in recent memory, but they have reminded us throughout this playoff run that they are one of the better fan bases in the league, and it's not an easy place to go and win a game. So for the Thunder to weather through that and get that win was incredibly impressive, and they should be proud of the way that game ended for them. And like you said, going back to Oklahoma City, if you're the Pacers, you're going to have to fight and claw to try to steal Game 5, or you're going to be in a very rough spot here. Thunder are going to be going back-to-back wins with all momentum heading back to Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and you're going to have to hope that they keep that same energy being down in the series as what they kept playing as a front runner. And you can't have your fan base with nervous energy, because that just leads and bleeds onto your team. You play with that same bit of nervousness that the crowd is exemplifying. So that'll be something to watch as that kind of unfolds. I do expect the Thunder to find a way to win this series, but I'm incredibly impressed by the Indiana Pacers, and I would not be surprised in any way, shape, or form if they pulled out a win in Game 5 and found a way to win the series even after losing Game 4. But as we kind of transition here, before we hop into some more offseason things, I want to hit on the Knicks coaching search. They have been denied by several more coaches since we last spoke. The official denials for Chris Finch and Ime Udoka went through. The denial for Jason Kidd was quickly denied by the Dallas Mavericks brass there. They then tried to get Quinn Snyder and Billy Donovan. Those were also both denied. From all reporting right now, as soon as the Knicks call them asking about the coach, they are emphatically hit with a no and are hung up on. And so the Knicks have now pivoted. They are planning to interview your guy Taylor Jenkins and Mike Brown for this head coaching role, amongst others that are expected to get into this race. I think we are both big fans of Taylor Jenkins, and so while I think it would be a very similar hire to what Tom Thibodeau was, I don't know that he necessarily raises the ceiling over what Tibbs would do, and so that would just seem redundant, and it would lead me to a lot of questions about why they moved on from him in the first place. But it seems they're trying to go after a coach that has head coaching experience rather than going after somebody who would be mostly unknown, and so you're going to see a lot of these names be retreaded, and it's just it's a crapshoot situation. The Knicks have to be face palming right now, just in shame about what has happened throughout this coaching search.
Yeah, this has been stunning to say the least. And I don't hate the idea of a team going out trying to make a big swing, especially in the coaching ranks, to go and get somebody big. But these teams have no incentive enough to lose their coach. I mean, they would have to trade for these coaches, and maybe they could give up some crazy number to get, but they don't have enough draft picks to really go even do that. So you mentioned these teams are just saying no. How can you blame them? And it starts with Chris Finch and moves down the list to even Billy Donovan, who the Bulls don't even want to give him up. So
that one I thought was surprising because we have seen many rumors over the last few years about the Bulls moving on from him, but based on their report, they really value his expertise and veteranship that he has in the coaching ranks and think that he will be very good for their young development. That one to me was maybe the most puzzling, but it just shows the value that these teams place on their coaches and why they haven't got rid of them to this point.
Yeah, but we move on to Taylor Jenkins, Mike Brown. I'm surprised we haven't heard Michael Malone's name yet. But I do love Taylor Jenkins, and I think he could be successful at just about any team in the league. He would get to go to a team that's already sort of built. I do question what's going to happen after. Some of these guys, leave or whatever. What they do with Bridges is how's the team going to look in 5 years for Taylor Jenkins? But, I mean, if you're Taylor Jenkins, the only concern I would have about going to take this job is having to deal with bad ownership. But Taylor Jenkins has had to deal with bad from player spots. So, he gets to go into a team that's already got two guys who are really highly regarded. And for Mike Brown, I just was really shocked on how that sort of turmoil there in Sacramento. I really don't know how his future is going to look and where he sort of stands as a coach in the NBA right now. I just think the Kings are kind of a doomed organization as a whole anyways, so I don't know. He's a very hard-nosed coach, but in a way Thibodeau could have been that too. I don't know. I think if you're out of the options that they're able to get, if I were a Knicks fan, I would gladly take Taylor Jenkins, but even then, how much stock do you put into the conversation about if you're Taylor Jenkins, do you sort of feel like you're only getting picked because these other organizations said no? Does that matter at all? I mean, as much money as these guys are making, it probably doesn't, but I mean, human nature can set in as well. I mean, whoever they hire is going to be their fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth option. And they probably knew they weren't going to get some of these guys like Finch or who was the second guy before Kidd.
Ime.
Yeah, like those two teams. There was just no way that they were going to let those guys up. I mean, why not go after Micah Nori, who's on Finch's staff,
who's been very hot in the head coaching name for many years now.
And is there any smoke on the guy from Johnny Bryant from Cleveland?
From all reports right now, it says they want somebody that's already had head coaching experience in the NBA.
I mean,
and so that really withers down their would they even is Mike Budenholzer, who's now been fired 2 straight years, is he?
But if Mike Brown's on this list, why wouldn't Mike Budenholzer be on this list? I don't know. And Taylor Jenkins is
another name that's been floated out there is Frank Vogel. And he's got championship experience.
You might as well, if you're going to interview these guys, you might as well interview all the guys that have sort of recently been fired that have either won championships or been highly regarded.
And most of those guys have been with the Phoenix Suns. And my biggest worry would be, is this situation going to turn into the Suns, where you've got this high-cost roster that's got a ton of expectations, and if you don't live up to the head coach that just brought the most success to this franchise in 25 years, that you're the next guy that's going to be canned, just like what happened after Monty Williams took Phoenix to their highest spot, and then everybody after that just keeps getting canned. So that would be my biggest worry for all these coaches too.
And that's what I sort of was pointing at with the Taylor Jenkins worrying about, as someone who's a Taylor Jenkins fan, a concern that I would have is that ownership there, how fast they are to sort of make moves. But I don't know. If I'm a Knicks fan, I like my roster where I'm sitting. It seems like they're probably out of the Durant stuff, probably. But, I mean, all those conversations we had about Jason Kidd and Giannis going to the Knicks together, I mean, those seem to be just dead. And so, it's kind of embarrassing from a Knicks standpoint. But they still have an opportunity to go get a really good basketball coach. So that's what they have to be excited for. But it is kind of embarrassing to see them get denied and rejected over and over and over by these NBA organizations who have not much incentive to give up their head coach, especially when the Knicks don't really have any draft capital to go get one of these coaches in the first place. So
yeah, now to transition away from enough New York Knicks talk. They've made a joke of themselves the last few weeks as it is. To another organization that we just talked about that's made a joke of themselves, the Phoenix Suns. We have plenty of more news about Kevin Durant since we last had talk. We went into depth about him and the potential fit with San Antonio in the last episode, as that was the overwhelming betting odds favorite. But we've had 17 shifts and paradigm changes since that has happened. The Spurs have fallen back a little bit. There was a thought that the Timberwolves were the running favorite. They went into minus money on betting sites there for a while, and now they're shifted back up. As Shams put out last night a report saying Kevin Durant's preferred 3 teams are the Miami Heat, San Antonio Spurs, and Houston Rockets. There has been just report after report after report from major outlets that have a lot of trust that just keep contradicting themselves. Nobody really knows what's going on here, and it is a PR nightmare and a PR battle between Kevin Durant's side, whether it's him and Rich Kleiman putting the stuff out, or there's been some of Kevin Durant's really close friends on stream talking about potential deals. And then you get the Suns that are putting out their side of this, sending it out saying, we're willing to just take the best deal possible. We don't care what Kevin wants. And it has become an arms race between these two sides. It's very clear that Kevin Durant is trying to put his influence on where he's going to land. Ultimately, like most star trades that happen, I think that is going to be what wins out in this situation. And the Suns right now are just trying to do their best to manage that situation as best as possible to get the best return out of the teams that Kevin Durant has requested to go to, because the reality of it is, if Kevin Durant is pushing against the trades to these other teams, they don't really have a ton of incentive to do these deals, especially at the price that it would likely require out of those teams. And so I think what is happening is the Heat, Spurs, and Houston Rockets have made their deals. They're just sitting back, waiting for the Suns to eventually give in to what the reality is, and they're going to have to take a deal from one of these three teams that maybe they're not overly excited about, but it's just the market that we live in. I'm going to dive into a little bit about the Heat here in a little bit because I think that's where this is trending just as a team that out of those three would be the most aggressive. The reports are that they really want Durant. It's just they're having a hard time putting together a package that maybe San Antonio or Houston can offer because the players that they are giving back are just not nearly as exciting or to the quality that those two Texas teams can put together. And in terms of Houston, it seems like there's a divide between Rafael Stone and Ime Udoka in terms of what that franchise wants. Stone clearly, it seems like, is not the biggest proponent, doesn't want to give up premier assets, whereas Ime is really excited about the potential of adding Kevin Durant to that roster. So they don't seem to be all that aggressive. They're just kind of sitting back and waiting, and then from all accounts, the Spurs have probably made their final offer, and they're just like they typically are, patient, sitting back, letting the chips fall as they may. And if they end up with Durant, they're happy with it. If they don't, they're just happy they didn't overpay, and they're not going to move off their number, which is what they have held on to for many, many years in negotiation tactics. And so I'll send it over to you in terms of thoughts about the PR that we've gone through, what your potential fit is with those three teams. Do you think that there's a chance that Phoenix actually does what they're claiming out in the news world and just trade him wherever?
No, I mean, I definitely side with you as you've kept the closest eye on this for the past few weeks, as probably anyone has. Um, how these we're getting information from the Spurs camp or the Suns camp, and then Durant's camp. Sort of this battle for leverage back and forth, which is completely normal in these sort of situations. But what I find interesting is this sort of rift, or not rift, but sort of schism, disagreement in the Rockets organization. And I just go back to them losing against the Warriors. And them, I just think the world and even they should have realized that, yes, they have a lot of pieces on that Rockets team who are, really good, really young pieces that they can sort of build around. But in no way, shape, or form was that team, even though they ended up with the 2 seed, good enough to go get over the hump in the Western Conference. And I'm not saying Durant would be the guy to do it, but it's trying. So, if you're the Rockets, I think you got to go at least try it, regardless if I truly think you're going to win the championship or not. Miami, I mean, I just think they're trying to go get some good players. I just don't think that they have a ton of good players, and you would at least have a pretty good a pretty good 3-man team with Bam, Hero, and Durant. But you're probably going to have to give up Ware. I mean, I'm curious to see what that Spurs offer is. I just think if I was Durant, the team I would want to go to is the Spurs because of what they have. But, I mean, also, I understand the Heat just because they're in the East. But in no way, shape, or form do I think the Heat are anywhere even close to a championship. And I don't think that they're closer to San Antonio if they go grab Durant. I don't think that they're closer, or I don't think they're closer than Houston either. And then Minnesota sort of been floating around as well. I don't really know what that package would have to be. I mean, I'm sure Anthony Edwards would be, really pushing for that. And I'm sure Durant wouldn't mind playing alongside Anthony Edwards, but I don't know. I just still think the Spurs are the best option if you were Kevin Durant. So it seems like to me you probably have the ability to sort of get to San Antonio if you truly want to. But maybe he wants to go live in that Miami life, and I'll let you break down sort of what they may have to give up just to sort of land Kevin Durant in the waning years of his career.
Yeah, and the interesting thing here is there's so many different teams involved, and the packages look just a lot different. From a Miami Heat standpoint, I'll break down a little bit of what their offer would have to look like. They have the least intriguing in terms of players that a team could potentially get back. And another thing to keep note on here as I dive into a few of these teams, it has been reported out there multiple times that the Phoenix Suns would like to get a starting caliber center out of any of these trades. And so for a couple of these teams, they're able to do it in their own roster has that piece that they can give up, and so they can form this easily in a 2-on-2 or just a 2-team deal, 1-on-1. And some of these other teams, they're probably going to have to bring in a third team, which through this deal, people are speculating that there's going to be a third team regardless, whether that's Chicago, whether that's Brooklyn, as I'll kind of get into with another team here in a minute. But for the Miami, they have the piece. They have Khalil Ware, who is high on the Suns' list in terms of players they can get back in a Kevin Durant trade. Up to this point, the Heat have been reluctant to include him in trade talks for Kevin Durant. And so up to this point, it has been a combination of Wiggins, Rozier, Duncan Robinson, Nikola Jovic, and that 20th overall pick. And really for the Heat, that 20th overall pick in terms of the teams that are at the top of Durant's list is also the worst thing that they could get back, because Houston has number 10 overall in this draft. San Antonio has 14 overall in this draft. And so Miami are just playing at a deficit as it is. And so based on the deals that have been reported up to this point, or at least speculated, the Heat just have the worst deal, and unless they give in Khalil Ware, have, in just my opinion, don't have an avenue to really get a Durant deal done without Khalil Ware. There's just no incentive for the Heat to take back these bad contracts. They'd get the worst pick out of this entire trade discussion. But to get this deal done, Durant has given the okay to Miami. If Miami's super concerned with getting Durant and they're wanting to go all in with Hero, Bam, and Durant, it would look like Aaron Wiggins, Duncan Robinson, Khalil Ware in that 20th overall pick. And it's hard to really include pick swaps because Phoenix already has a lot of theirs sent out in previous deals. And so that's just something to look at. It's going to have to be just a straight-up draft pick without any swaps or stuff like that. And so that 20th overall pick would be included in this deal, and maybe because of the lack of upside with the players that they can give back, they might have to include another pick. And so that's from the Miami Heat standpoint. Now, in terms of San Antonio, who out of the three teams at the top I think is most likely, just because I think their interest in acquiring Durant is slightly higher than Houston, even though Houston might be able to put together the best one-on-one deal. For San Antonio to get this done, I would think that they're going to have to get the Brooklyn Nets involved. Now, this would mean Durant would be heading to San Antonio. The Spurs would be shipping Devin Vassell to the Nets. They'd be shipping pick 14 to the Nets. They'd be shipping Malachi Branham to the Nets. And this would mean Nicholas Claxton would come back to Phoenix. Blake Wesley would come back to Phoenix. And the Spurs are going to have to send out one more player. And the Spurs really don't want to give this guy away. But if they're going to want to get a deal done with Durant, I think they're probably going to have to include Jeremy Shohan, which I don't think they're going to want to do, which is the biggest reason why I don't think that this deal gets done. They could include Keldon Johnson or Barnes, and the salary would work out, but I'm not sure how much that would mean to either one of these teams. And so in this hypothetical, they would be sending Jeremy to Phoenix, and the complete trade would look like Phoenix would be trading away Kevin Durant, getting back Nicholas Claxton, Jeremy Shohan, Blake Wesley. Spurs would be sending out Devin Vassell, Jeremy Shohan, Blake Wesley, Malachi Branham, and the 14th overall pick to get Kevin Durant. Brooklyn would be trading away Nicholas Claxton. They'd get back Branham, Vassell, and 14. And so this would be a three-team proposal that each of these teams could look at and say, we're getting value out of this in some shape or fashion. For the Nets, you're getting off of that Nick Claxton deal, which has been rumored for a while. You're getting a young, promising wing in Vassell who's going to have a full offseason to develop here. There's still a lot of upside for him. You're also getting the 14th overall pick, which there's been a lot of speculation about the Nets either wanting to move up in the draft or acquiring a second lottery pick, this would give them the avenue to do so. And this satisfies Phoenix's urge to get back a starting caliber center. They'd get a pretty good one in Nick Claxton. They'd also get a very good front court running mate for him and Jeremy Shohan. I think this would balance out that Phoenix Suns roster probably better than just having Kevin Durant on this. And if they want draft capital in return, the Spurs could probably give up 38 in this draft and maybe a future second. They could make it work somehow, but that would be the main parameters of the deal if you're San Antonio. And then for Houston, it's a little simpler in terms of they can probably do this straight up, where it's just Jabari Smith as the big that would be heading to Phoenix. And you'd probably include Jalen Green, which it's interesting that Jalen Green has now come out. There's a report from his camp saying he wants to stay in Houston and wants to develop and be a true prime playoff performer for this roster after his failed playoff performance from this year. And so it's just so many different PR spins that's happening through this deal. Clearly, he doesn't want to go to Phoenix, but it may be out of his hands. And so that would be from those three teams' perspective. If you're looking from a Timberwolves perspective, it gets really tricky because the apron rules, they can't do this deal because both teams are second apron strapped for this calendar year, meaning they can't aggregate salaries together. So the Timberwolves cannot get up to Kevin Durant's number without including multiple players. But because they're a second apron team, they're not allowed to put multiple players in a deal together to aggregate salaries. And so they're going to have to wait till after the draft, after the new league year starts, and then it's going to be a package of Rudy Gobert, Dante DiVincenzo, and maybe either Terrence Shannon, or you're looking at a Rob Dillingham, and that would get you to Kevin Durant. That would satisfy the Suns' need for a center, and then the Timberwolves would get the star forward that they would be looking for. So those would be the four teams that I think are most interested. There's the outside shot that the Raptors could get involved, but how eager are they going to want to be? They've already got Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram in the front court. Not sure there's going to be a ton of legs there, but those would be the four packages from those teams. I think San Antonio likely has to get a third team involved to get the center that the Suns would be aiming to achieve out of this deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could look back and say one of those four trades could happen almost exactly to what your sort of parameters are. I think that's pretty good intel by you, and all of those trades were pretty much matched up salary and all those things that would be accepted. I mean, maybe a couple things change here and there, but I mean, if you're a Suns fan, it's not a bad situation for you if you go in the direction of San Antonio tied in with Brooklyn or just the Heat, because they're missing that center. You could really go get a guy like in Khalil Ware, who's only coming off his rookie season, who has a lot of upside. Or, in this case, you mentioned Nick Claxton moving to Phoenix, who has a pretty high market right now. Obviously, the Lakers, a couple other teams who need a big, are rumored to be trying to go after and get this guy. I'm not as high on him maybe as some of these other teams, but I think he'd come in for Phoenix and be solid for him. And, I mean, if you're Brooklyn, I mean, what do you have to lose? I mean, you have so many draft picks, and you're not doing anything this coming up season. Go out and get some decent stuff for Nick Claxton while you can. You can go get Vassell, who can sort of give you a little bit of what you lost Bridges for maybe, and even go get that. If you do it early enough, you could get that 14th pick from San Antonio, combine it with the pick you already have, move up, and really go get somebody you like. So, I don't know. There's a lot of different moving pieces that are going to have to take place for this to happen, especially if it involves that third team. But, I mean, really and truly, I think it's going to end up being one of those things. And I just find it curious to see that, who – it probably seems to me like it's coming down to the Heat. Who's going to cave in with either Shohan or Ware, if it's going to come down to those two teams? Which team's really just going to be desperate enough to put one of those two guys on the table, and maybe that's what Phoenix is just waiting on. I don't know, and if Durant specifically says that's the only team I want to go to, do they honor it? Probably so. But, I mean, Phoenix is going to get something good back, although it may not be as good as what us Memphis Grizzlies fans just received. Well, we got a lot of draft capital. It's probably not going to be as much draft capital. Although Phoenix probably should go in that sort of direction given that they traded all of their picks away to Houston. So the smartest thing to do, in my opinion, would be to go to Houston and get all those draft picks back. They don't want to do that, seemingly based on just Ishbia's comments of wanting to stay all in every single year. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but, I mean, I think these are very good hypotheticals that could very well come true, and we might date back to this episode and say this trade or this trade or this trade that you just pointed out was the exact same thing that ends up happening. It's just a matter of when at this point.
Yeah, and there's a chance. I mean, the Nets have dangled out Cameron Johnson as a trade chip. Is that potentially something that Phoenix could also get back? It would probably require more stuff that you're getting from San Antonio heading to Brooklyn, and it just a lot of stuff, moving parts that could be going on. If you're Phoenix, which trade package would you really like out of these? I'm not sure there's a clear-cut winner. I think they'd be very intrigued with if the Nets were truly involved and they can get Nick Claxton. Would you rather have Nick Claxton or Khalil Ware at this point in their careers? That would be a big question mark if that was somehow the decision that they were making. It seems like Minnesota's kind of fading out of this, so I don't know that the Gobert package is really truly in the cards at this point. And so I really think if Houston gets aggressive for this deal, they're probably going to get it because they're going to have the best combination of players and picks that Phoenix can get. They can get back some of their first-round picks that Houston owns. As much slack as Jalen Green has gotten, he's still a super talented young player. Jabari Smith is still a super intriguing young player. They could even maybe steal a Reed Shepherd or a Tari Eason or Cam Whitmore. They can probably get the best combination of young upside players and picks. But the question is how motivated is Houston really to get a deal done? I mean, Rafael Stone has multiple times implied that he is comfortable waiting and just letting this team develop and doing it organically like how the Oklahoma City Thunder have done it. And so I'm not sure that they're the most aggressive team in this scenario. I think Miami probably is, but like I said, they probably have the worst offer. And so I think it comes down to how desperate does Miami get, how aggressive does Houston get, and how stoic does San Antonio stay? Do they stay dug in their heels? That's the real thing here. And if San Antonio can get a third team involved or we get significant assets heading back to Phoenix, that could really sway things. There's so much moving parts to go on here, and from a Phoenix standpoint, I'm not sure how this is going to end up, but they might be able to make themselves out better than what was initially expected. But I still don't think for Phoenix Suns fans they're going to be extremely thrilled, especially after the politicking that Durant has done the last day or so. He is really trying to influence the direction that this trade ends up going. And so that's going to be what ultimately I think ends up deciding the deal. Is it's going to be Durant pressuring Phoenix, and some of these teams are going to back out. Phoenix is going to be back into a corner, and they're just going to have to take the best deal that presents to them at that time.
Probably so, and I don't know what that team is. This thing's changing. We're getting new information every hour. I mean, last night really escalated with some Shams tweets that probably had you real nervous to open up and see exactly what those were. And he mentions that only those three teams, with Miami, San Antonio, and Houston, were those only the three teams that he's looking at those are the three teams he's willing to sign an extension with, seemingly based on Shams' reports last night. But, I mean, who knows? We might get a team that's really not being mentioned right now, or maybe Minnesota just keeps making big moves. Every year, Minnesota really goes out and makes some big moves. If we go back to Rudy Gobert, going to get him, going to trade Karl Anthony Towns, the Wolves are not afraid to go out and make big moves. So we'll see what they do here, but I don't know. I'd like to see him go to the Spurs for your sake, and I'd like to see Wemby alongside a superstar. It would obviously be very scary as a Grizzlies fan, as a person who likes Nikola Jokic and roots for them. I mean, it's not something I'd want to go against for sure. It'd be scary, but man, I think it'd be good for the NBA as a whole to go ahead and get Wemby moving towards that face of the league, and it would only help having a guy in Kevin Durant who he's probably looked up to, and plays a lot similar to him, especially on the offensive end. I mean, just think of the one-on-one clips we'd get just from practice and kind of things like that we could get. So I don't know, from a basketball standpoint, from just being a fan of the NBA as a whole, hope he ends up with San Antonio. I don't want to hear you gloating, though, too much if that does happen, which it's guaranteed to happen. And I don't blame you because, you would be adding Kevin Durant to your team. But don't let Casey fool you here. He's playing a lot of reverse psychology, trying to get him to the Miami Heat. But, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I think deep down in Kevin Durant's psyche or heart, he wants to end up with San Antonio.
Yeah, it would be electric, and you probably would not hear the end of it. Regardless of what happens, I'll be extremely interested to hear what the package is in this deal. There's been so many rumors for so many weeks, and now it's really picking up. For the longest time, I really felt like a deal was going to happen today, just based on timing-wise in terms of the finals being on. It still could, and the last several times that Durant has been traded, it's also happened at like 2 a.m. When he got traded to Phoenix, right. It was at 2 a.m.
That's a very good point.
The Kawhi Leonard, Paul George stuff happened at 3 a.m. Like, some of these things of this magnitude happen when they're pressed up against a deadline, and then it happens in the wee bit of night. They'll iron out these deals. The GM that they're going to eventually do the deal with, they sit down and say, we're not going to bed. We're not ending these discussions until a deal gets done. And so these things can happen late at night. And so when I saw that notification last night, that definitely is what popped into my head. It was like, oh, this is what's happening. They just ironed this out overnight. And so that's very well possibility. So every night that I go to bed, I'm going to be nervous. I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning and miss massive trade news. And so that's what I'm mentally preparing myself for.
Multiple times, as you said, with Kevin Durant. I remember being with the trade to the Nets, and even going to the Spurs, the Suns, if you remember, that was actually during Super Bowl week.
Yep.
In Phoenix is where the Super Bowl was. So you had all of Media Row down there in Phoenix, and then all of a sudden NBA headlines sort of stole a little bit of Super Bowl week media runs there when Kevin Durant ended up with Phoenix there at that deadline. But, I'm hoping, I'm sort of getting tired of all these conversations with Kevin Durant. I'm ready for a deal to just get done, but we don't know exactly when that's going to be, so we're just going to have to keep dealing with it until it does, because that's just kind of how these things go, especially when you have a player this magnitude, this much. Kevin Durant, like, maybe he's not the player he used to be, but you got to think of how much impact he has as far as jersey sales and all those type things that he can bring to an organization. He's so many people's favorite player, so you're going to have a number of fans move towards whatever fan base he's going to wind up with. And he's an all-time top 20 NBA player in the history of the game. So, who knows what happens next? But I'm ready for it to get to its conclusion.
Yeah, and then it's very possible that the next podcast you hear from us is an emergency episode breaking down that trade and all the outcomes that could happen as a result of it. If that happens before our next scheduled podcast date, then you'll definitely be hearing probably a shortened breaking news episode on that just because it's such massive news that we want to hit on quickly and get our thoughts out to y'all. So you're not asking a bunch, y'all can hear that. In terms of where we stand moving forward, we got Game 5 of the NBA Finals taking place Monday night in Oklahoma City. Finals are continuing. We'll have Game 6 of it when we get to that point Thursday night, and then Game 7 will be Sunday. And then after that, one day after the conclusion, teams will be allowed to renegotiate with their own players. Team options and stuff like that will have already been hammered through. We're looking at the draft a week from Wednesday. We'll have round 1 of the draft, round 2 take place Thursday. And then shortly after that, the league year will open up with free agency July 1st. So there's a lot of stuff right around the corner. The next few weeks are going to be extremely busy. I'm expecting this Durant deal to get done within the next few days. So we'll have plenty of that to discuss. There's going to be a lot of names popping up in trade discussions over the course of the next few weeks. We're going to have trades occur during the draft. Obviously, we'll discuss things that are happening with the draft. A lot that you're going to hear over the next week is just going to be complete BS, smoke.
Leverage
plays. The idea that the Spurs are now considering trading the number 2 pick just 1 week before the draft seems rather interesting, and just seems like teams are trying to get desperate and spark action, and it's just, you just got to read through a lot of it, filter it through what's real, what's not. And that's the tough part. And that's why I've been keeping such close tabs on the Durant stuff. You got to know who to trust, know what to look for, know what you're looking at, and who it benefits. The biggest thing is right now, you have to ask yourself, who does this benefit by getting out? Does this help the player? Does this help the team? Who wants this information out? Why is it out? What does it do? What's the impact of it? And so that's the big thing as you see rumors over the next few weeks. Look at that, and that will determine kind of where things stand. But for us, this was episode 20. We've got a lot more on the horizon. Please reach out to us about feedback. We love hearing everything y'all have to say about the podcast. Leave us a review on wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple Podcast, Spotify. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, at the State Line Fast Break Pod. We thank you for listening.